So let's go to the next chapter, chapter 11, muscular tissue. Scroll down, and obviously we said that muscles are going to help us with multiple different things, such as movement, control of body openings, heat production, etc., etc. But the cells in the muscles have to have certain characteristics in order to be able to achieve all these functions. And these characteristics that the cells must have are excitability. And one of the first things that I want you to pay attention here is, look, electricity. Another one is conductivity. Why? Because it should be able to conduct electricity. You see it? So electricity is very important. That's something that we're going to be talking about a lot in this chapter. Then obviously the muscle cells must be able to contract in order to allow all the different type of movements that we're going to have with the muscles. They should be able to extend, right? If they are going to be able to contract, then they should be able to extend. That's another characteristic. And then obviously they should be able to have elasticity, because once they extend, they should be able to recoil back. If we look at the skeletal muscle characteristics, we cut the muscle, we put in the microscope, and we look at the characteristic that the muscle cell has. And some of the things that you're going to see in there are going to be that it has striations, which are these lines right here. Okay, that's striations. It has multiple nucleus, as you can see here. Endomysium covers the muscle fiber. Okay. And obviously is voluntary, right? This is a skeletal muscle, and I said, right, it's skeletal. And we said that the skeletal muscles are attached to the skeleton. Obviously, you can move, you can flex your fingers, you can flex your arm, you can extend your arm, because these muscles are voluntary. If you don't want to do it, you don't do it. Why? Because they're voluntary. Cardiac muscle and smooth muscle are involuntary. So those are main characteristics that we have regarding the skeletal. Also, the skeletal muscle is very long, right? So it's long, and they are called muscle fibers or myofibers. So the next item that we have in this chapter is microscopic anatomy of the skeletal muscle. So let's take a look at some of the characteristics that we have right here. This is the muscle cell here in yellow, and inside you can see inside the muscle cells you have myofilaments and myofibrils. Myofilaments is what is the machinery that will allow the muscle to contract, and we're going to see that with a little bit more detail. And let's scroll down all this so we can see that part with a little bit more information right here. From top to bottom, what is a muscle made of? Fascicle. What is a fascicle made of? Muscle fibers. What's a muscle fiber made of? Myofibrils. What is a myofibril made of? Myofilaments. Which ones are the myofilaments? Thin and thick. What is another name for thick and thin? Actin and myosin. So let's take a look at this with a little bit more detail. So we scroll up, and we're going to see this part right here. Okay, you have this with a little bit more detail. Okay, you have in here the thin and the thick filament again. Are these the only proteins that we have? These are made of proteins. Thick and thin filament the only ones we have? No, we also have this. This is an elastic filament. This is a protein called dystrophin, and these are other proteins that we have also inside our muscle cells. And these two are the ones that are going to perform the movement. This one, the green one, the elastic filaments that we have in here, they're going to basically anchor these filaments so they can actually have a support, an area to attach to in order to perform a movement. Thin filament eventually is going to move, and this movement is going to be transmitted to dystrophin. Dystrophin is going to transfer this movement to these other proteins, and these proteins, they are going to continue with what the tendon is. So the movement that you're going to achieve here is going to be transmitted to the tendon. Remember, muscles are attached to the bones. How? Using tendons. And remember we said we have origin and insertion? Well, those are the points of attachment using the tendon. Green. If you look at this, look at the distribution of these filaments. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. What do you have in here? 1, 2, 3, 4. But these ones are thicker. So if you look at this from far away, from here to here, all this area is going to be darker because these are thicker compared to this area. So if you scroll down, which is what you have in here, clear, darker, and this is shown in here. See by these columns, you can see that clear, darker, clear, darker, and this is the sarcomere, and it has different lines and bands, and that's why you see these names right here. Okay, so this is obviously the H band, the M line, the C disc. I told you sarcomere goes from one side to the other C disc. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Those are basically the main type of proteins that you have in a muscle. Now, there are a couple of things that you need to know that are very important because we are going to see them later on. This one right here, again, thin filament, thick filament. We already looked at that. The muscle contraction is like a movie or like a play. Okay, so if this is a movie, the actors are going to be the myosin head in the myosin, and in the actin or thin filament, you're going to have three players. What is the red tomato? Actin. What is the golden cupcake? Troponin. What is the sliding door? Tropomyosin. You need to remember these things. The myosin has myosin head, and the actin has three pieces: the red tomato, golden cupcake, sliding door. Sliding door is tropomyosin. Troponin is the golden cupcake. Actin is the red tomato. So if we keep scrolling up, we get to the same area where we were before. This is the cell. Okay, we already talked about that. Let me see where glycogen is necessary to provide ATP. Myoglobin is necessary to provide the oxygen, right? Obviously, you need food in the case of glucose to provide the nutrients for the cell so it can produce ATP, and you also need oxygen to produce ATP. We said the disposition of these filaments, these are going to be dark and this is going to be clear, giving you the dark and clear that you guys can see here. Dark, clear, right? And these ones are the ones that we see as striations in the skeletal muscle. So we talk about that. We said I bands. So right here we said again, what is the muscle made of? Fascicles. What's the fascicle made of? Muscle fibers. And what's the muscle fiber made of? Myofibers. And which ones? What is the myofiber made of? Myofilaments. And which ones are the myofilaments? Thin or thick filament, or actin and myosin, which is in this case purple and red. And that's about it for this part. Okay, let's continue with the next topic in this chapter, which is nerve-muscle relationship. We said that we need a nerve in order to make a muscle move. So right here you have the nerves, and this nerve is going to be called a motor neuron. Later on, you're going to see when we are in the nervous system chapter that you have different kinds of neurons. For example, you have sensory and motor neurons. In this case, this is going to be a motor neuron. What is this, a motor neuron? Because it's going to be connected to these muscle fibers and it's going to make your muscle move. Okay, so then the nerve in red and the muscle fiber right here, they're going to get together in this basically white area that you guys see there. White area, that is the neuromuscular junction. So let's take a look at that with a little bit more detail, and we can see right here the neuromuscular junction. So what is a neuromuscular junction? Then it's the area junction where the nerve neuron and the muscle muscular get together. So what's the neuromuscular junction? The area where the nerve and the muscle get together. What did I say that they get together? Because they do not touch. If you scroll down right here, again, we have, what is this thing in black? The nerve. What is this thing in red? The muscle fiber. What is this area then? This is the neuromuscular junction. Okay, so we have in here a graphical representation of that, where here you have the nerve, and down here you have the muscle. This black area right here, you see, that's the space between the nerve and the muscle, and this black area is called the synaptic cleft. That's the space between the nerve and the muscle. So then if the nerve and the muscle don't touch, then how is it that the nerve is able to transfer the information to the muscle so the muscle can contract? For that purpose, the nerve is going to have these green vesicles inside here. In these vesicles, in these balloons, that nerve is going to have a chemical, and this chemical is called ACH, or acetylcholine. So when the impulse from the nerve comes down here, it reaches the vesicle. The vesicle is going to release the neurotransmitter in the synaptic cleft, in this space. The chemical is going to diffuse, is going basically to swim through this space, and is going to reach the purple receptors that you guys see here, these purple receptors. Once the neurotransmitter acetylcholine gets in contact with the purple receptors, now the information is already at the level of the muscle, and that's how the information gets transferred from the nerve into the muscle. Why? Because the nerve has a neurotransmitter and the muscle has a receptor for that neurotransmitter. What is the name of the neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine. Okay? And the receptors, they have names. You don't need to know them at this time, but just in case, they are called nicotinic receptors or muscarinic receptors, depending on what is it that we are talking about. So, but this time you just need to know that these are the receptors. So let's keep scrolling down. Let's see what we have. So we say synaptic cleft, we say acetylcholine receptors. Okay, and now we reach to this area where we will have to talk about electricity. Right here, you see electrically. Okay, now from this point on, we will need to talk about a whole bunch of electricity, and electricity is therefore we need to talk about voltage, right? Because obviously voltage is the way we express electricity, and here we need to understand how we get that inside our body. If you really think about a AA battery, the one that you put inside your remote control, for example, it has two ends, the top and the bottom, right? And the top and the bottom, they're going to have different charges. One side is going to be positive, the other one is going to be negative. So then how come in our body we can have positives and negatives in order to have voltage? Well, that got to do with the different type of ions that we have inside of us. For example, we eat with French fries, we put salt. What is salt? Sodium chloride, right? And what is the charge that sodium has? Positive. What's the charge that chloride has? Negative. Okay, then if you just think about these two ions, then there you go. Once you eat the salt, you have sodiums and you have chlorines, therefore you have positives and negatives inside your body, and that's how you can get the positives and the negatives that you need in order to get electricity. I'm going to another chapter to show you these ions that I was telling you about. For example, right here you have sodium, see, and chloride right here, and sodium right here. You can see this one right here says blood plasma because this is outside the cell, and this is inside the cell. So if you look at these ions, sodium is the most important ion outside the cell, extracellular. Potassium is the most important ion intracellular. And you need to remember these two because these are the two ions that are going to make all this electricity possible. Okay, so you have to remember that part.